White police captain receives anonymous note from black teen activist. What happens next changes everything. Meet me at Riverside Park, midnight. Come alone. Your career depends on it. The handwritten note was shoved under Captain Sarah Mitchell's office door at 11:47 p.m., just as she was finishing another 16-hour day reviewing budget reports. The 45-year-old police captain had dedicated 23 years of her life to law enforcement, working her way up from beat cop to commanding the East District Precinct in Chicago. Sarah stared at the note, her coffee growing cold. Anonymous. Tips weren't unusual, but something about the careful handwriting, young, determined, made her pause. Outside her office window, protests had been happening for weeks following a controversial arrest that had gone viral. The community's trust in her department was at an all-time low, and Sarah felt the weight of every accusation, every chant, every sign demanding justice. Against every protocol she'd ever learned, Sarah found herself walking through Riverside Park at 11:58 p.m., her hand instinctively near her service weapon. The park was empty except for the distant sound of traffic and her own footsteps on the gravel path. "Captain Mitchell?" The voice came from behind a large oak tree. A young black man, maybe 17 or 18, stepped into the dim streetlight. He was tall, wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt and carrying a worn backpack. His eyes held a wariness that seemed too old for his face. "I'm Marcus Johnson," he said, extending his hand formally. "Thank you for coming." "I wasn't sure you would." Sarah kept her distance, but didn't draw her weapon. "What's this about, son?" "It's about Officer Bradley and Detective Reynolds," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness, "and why my little brother is sitting in juvenile detention for a crime he didn't commit." The names hit Sarah like a physical blow. Officer Mike Bradley and Detective Tom Reynolds were two of her most trusted officers, with spotless records and commendations for community service. Bradley had 15 years on the force, Reynolds had 12. Both were respected by their peers and had never had a sustained complaint. "That's a serious accusation," Sarah said carefully. "What evidence do you have?" Marcus reached into his backpack slowly, never breaking eye contact. He pulled out a tablet and a thick manila envelope. 3 months of evidence, photos, recordings, witness statements, financial records. They've been running a protection racket in the South Side, targeting black-owned businesses. When business owners couldn't pay, they'd plant drugs and make arrests. Sarah's blood ran cold. "Why come to me? Why not internal affairs?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. "Captain, Detective Reynolds's brother-in-law works in internal affairs. Officer Bradley's cousin is in the DA's office. You think they don't know how to protect themselves?" The implications were staggering. Sarah had built her career on the belief that good cops would always outnumber bad ones, that the system could police itself. "Why should I trust you?" "Because," Marcus said, handing her the tablet, "my little brother Deshaun got arrested last week for possession with intent to distribute. 2 kilos of cocaine allegedly found in his backpack during a routine stop." His voice cracked slightly. "Captain, Deshaun is 14 years old. He's on the honor roll. He's never even had detention." Sarah looked at the tablet screen. Security. Camera footage from a corner store showed Officer Bradley and Detective Reynolds entering the back alley where Deshaun was stopped. The timestamp showed them arriving 3 minutes before the official report claimed they discovered the boy. The store owner, Mr. Kim, refused to pay their monthly protection fee last week, Marcus continued. Coincidentally, his son's friend gets arrested with drugs right outside his store. Mr. Kim paid up the next day. The footage was damning, but Sarah had to ask the obvious question. "How did you get this?" Marcus smiled for the first time, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Captain, I'm a senior at Roosevelt High. I'm also president of the Student Technology Club, and I've been accepted to MIT for computer science. When the police won't protect your community, you learn to protect yourself." Over the next 2 hours, Marcus laid out a conspiracy that made Sarah's stomach turn. Bradley and Reynolds had created a systematic shakedown operation targeting immigrant-owned businesses and black entrepreneurs who were less likely to complain to authorities. When businesses couldn't pay, family members were arrested on drug charges with planted evidence. 17 families in 6 months, Marcus said, showing Sarah a detailed spreadsheet. Average extortion payment, $2,000 per month. Total estimated theft, over $200,000. And that's just what we can prove. Sarah studied the evidence with growing horror. Bank deposits that coincided with business shakedowns. Photos of Bradley and Reynolds meeting with known drug dealers. Recordings of them discussing which businesses to target next. My little brother isn't the first innocent kid they've arrested, Marcus continued, but I made sure he'd be the last. Why didn't you go to the media? Sarah asked. Marcus, quote his expression, hardened. Captain, I'm an 18-year-old black kid accusing 2 white police officers of corruption. Without ironclad proof, who do you think people would believe? The truth of that statement hit Sarah like a punch. Despite all her years in law enforcement, despite her belief in justice and due process, she knew Marcus was right. A young black activist making accusations against decorated officers would be dismissed as biased, angry, looking for attention. "Oh, what do you want from me?" she asked. "I want you to be the police captain I've read about in the newspapers," Marcus said. "The one who cleaned up the narcotics division 5 years ago, the one who testified against those officers who were taking bribes from the cartels. I want you to be the cop who does the right thing, even when it's hard." Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Detective Reynolds. "Captain, we got another drug bust tonight. Big one. Kid was carrying enough to put him away for years. Community's going to love seeing us get these dealers off the street." She showed the message to Marcus, whose jaw clenched. "That's my cousin Jerome, 16 years old, honor student, works part-time at his mom's hair salon." He looked at Sarah with desperate eyes. "Captain, they're not going to stop. Every time a business owner stands up to them, another kid gets arrested. They're destroying families." Sarah made a decision that would change everything. "Marcus, I need you to trust me. Can you get me into that corner store to talk to Mr. Kim?" "He's scared, Captain. Really scared. They threatened his whole family." "Then we better move fast." 20 minutes later, Sarah was sitting in the back room of Kim's corner market, listening to the broken English of a man who had fled violence in his home country only to face extortion in America. "They say pay money or son go to jail," Mr. Kim whispered, his hands shaking as he poured tea. "I work 16 hours every day for 20 years to build this business. They take everything." Mrs. Kim brought out a shoebox filled with receipts and photos, evidence of every payment, every threat, every visit from Bradley and Reynolds. She had documented everything with the precision of someone who had lived through oppression before. "In Korea, we learned to keep records of police," she explained. "Sometimes good police need proof to fight bad police." Sarah's radio crackled. "All units. We have reports of a drug bust in progress on 5th and Madison, requesting backup for prisoner. Transport." Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm. "That's Jerome. They're arresting him right now." Sarah made a split-second decision. "Mr. Kim, I need you to call 911 and report that you're witnessing police misconduct at 5th and Madison. Say you have video evidence." As they raced through the empty streets, Marcus asked, "Captain, why are you helping us?" Sarah thought about her own daughter, safe in her suburban bedroom, about the promise she'd made to serve and protect all citizens, not just the ones who looked like her, about the badge that was supposed to mean something. "Because," she said, 23 years ago, I became a police officer to fight injustice. Somehow, I forgot that sometimes injustice wears a badge." They arrived at 5th and Madison to find Bradley and Reynolds standing over a handcuffed teenager, while a small crowd of neighbors watched from their porches. Sarah could see the fear in Jerome's eyes, the resignation in his mother's face as she stood helplessly on the sidewalk. "Bradley Reynolds," Sarah called out, approaching with her body camera activated. "What's the situation?" "Routine stop, Captain," Bradley replied smoothly. Kid was acting suspicious. Found 2 kilos of cocaine in his backpack. "Witnesses?" Sarah asked. Reynolds gestured dismissively at the watching neighbors. "You know how it is in this neighborhood, Captain. Nobody ever sees anything when we need them to." Sarah nodded, then pulled out her phone. "Dispatch, this is Captain Mitchell. I need a crime scene unit at 5th and Madison immediately. Full processing, multiple cameras." Bradley and Reynolds exchanged glances. "Captain, it's just a simple drug bust," Bradley said. "We don't need CSI for street-level dealing." "Actually," Sarah said, "we do." She turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Captain Sarah Mitchell. If anyone has cell phone video of what happened here tonight, please don't delete it. We'll need it for evidence." Several hands went up. Mrs. Johnson, Jerome's mother, stepped forward. "I recorded the whole thing, Captain, from the moment they pulled him over." Reynolds's confident expression faltered. "Captain, these people will say anything to protect a dealer." "Then let's see what the evidence shows," Sarah replied. She turned to Marcus, who had been filming everything on his phone. "Son, would you mind emailing me that footage?" Over the next hour, as crime scene technicians processed the arrest site, a very different picture emerged. Mrs. Johnson's cell phone video showed Bradley placing something in Jerome's backpack while Reynolds distracted the boy. Security camera footage from a nearby business showed the officers arriving at the location 10 minutes before Jerome walked down the street. "Captain," the lead technician whispered to Sarah, "the cocaine has no fingerprints on it except the officers who found it. And the kid's backpack tests positive for bleach residue. Someone cleaned it recently to remove evidence." Bradley and Reynolds stood 20 feet away, no longer looking confident. They had gone from predators to prey in the span of an hour, and they knew it. "Officers," Sarah announced loudly enough for the crowd to hear, "you're both suspended pending a full internal affairs investigation. Turn in your badges and weapons." "Captain, you can't be serious," Reynolds protested. "You're going to believe these people over your own officers?" Sarah looked at the crowd of neighbors who had come out to witness justice. At Marcus, whose courage had made this possible. At Jerome, still in handcuffs, but no longer looking defeated. At Mrs. Johnson, whose simple act of recording had exposed the truth. "Reynolds," she said, "I believe the evidence. And right now, the evidence says you and Bradley are under arrest for conspiracy, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations." The next morning, Sarah's office was chaos. The arrests of Bradley and Reynolds had made national news. Internal affairs investigators filled her conference room. FBI agents had taken over 2 floors of the building to investigate the broader corruption scheme. Marcus sat in her office, no longer the nervous teenager from the park. Word of his role in exposing the conspiracy had spread through the community, and he had become an overnight symbol of youth activism and courage. "Captain," he said, "there's something I need to tell you, something I should have mentioned last night." Sarah looked up from the mountain of paperwork. "What is it?" "My full name is Marcus Johnson Mitchell," he said quietly. "My mother was Lisa Johnson before she married my stepfather, but my biological father was Officer David Mitchell." The room went silent. Sarah stared at the young man, seeing for the first time the familiar jawline, the determined eyes that reminded her of someone. "David Mitchell was my brother," she whispered. "He died in the line of duty 15 years ago." Marcus nodded. "My, Mom told me stories about Uncle David's sister who became a police captain. How she was the only one who came to his funeral in uniform. How she made sure my mom got his full pension, even though they weren't married yet." The pieces clicked together. Sarah remembered Lisa, the young woman David had been planning to marry. Remembered the little boy who had held Lisa's hand at the funeral. Remembered making sure they were taken care of, even though department policy didn't require it. "You're my nephew," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I've been watching your career." "For years," Marcus admitted. "When this started happening in our neighborhood, when Deshaun got arrested, I knew there was only one cop in the city I could trust, the one who kept my dad's promise to protect people, even after he was gone. 3 months later, Sarah stood before a packed auditorium at Roosevelt High School, presenting Marcus with the city's Youth Leadership Award. Officer Bradley and Detective Reynolds had been sentenced to 8 and 10 years in federal prison, respectively. 17 families had their criminal records expunged, and the city had paid $3.2 million in settlements. Deshawn sat in the front row, free and back in honor roll classes. Jerome was there too, along with dozens of other young people who had been victims of the corruption scheme. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah announced, "this young man taught me that being a good police officer isn't about protecting the badge. It's about protecting the community, even when that means turning in bad cops." Marcus stepped to the microphone, looking out at an audience that included police officers, community leaders, and his MIT admissions counselor who had flown in for the ceremony. "6 months ago, I thought all cops were the enemy," he began. "I thought the system was broken beyond repair. I thought my little brother was going to prison for a crime he didn't commit, and there was nothing I could do about it." He looked at Sarah, then at the crowd. "I learned that the system isn't broken because of bad cops. It's broken because good cops sometimes stay silent. But when good cops and good citizens work together, we can fix anything." After the ceremony, Sarah and Marcus walked through the same park where they had first met. "You know," Sarah said, "your father would be proud of you, not just for exposing the corruption, but for giving me the chance to be the cop he always believed I could be." Marcus smiled. "Aunt Sarah, I think he's been looking out for both of us." 2 years later, the East District had the highest community trust ratings in the city. Sarah had implemented a citizen oversight program that Marcus helped design. Crime rates had dropped 35%, and police complaints had decreased by 60%. Marcus was thriving at MIT, majoring in computer science with a minor in criminal justice. He spent his summers interning with the police department, developing technology to prevent corruption and improve community relations. The program they created together, Bridges, had been adopted by police departments across the country. It paired young community activists with police officers to identify and solve problems before they became crises. "You know what the best part is?" Marcus said during a video call from his MIT dorm room. "Deshawn wants to be a police officer now. He says he wants to be like his Aunt Sarah." Sarah laughed, looking at the photo on her desk of Marcus receiving his high school diploma. Next to it was a picture of her brother David in his police uniform and a newer photo of her and Marcus at a Bridges program graduation. "Marcus," she said, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't left that note under my door?" "Every day," he replied. "But then I remember what my dad taught me before he died. He said that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust someone, even when you have every reason not to." Sarah nodded, understanding now that courage wasn't about wearing a badge or carrying a gun. It was about a teenager risking everything to save his little brother. It was about a police captain choosing justice over loyalty. It was about two people from different worlds discovering that they were family all along. The story of Marcus and Sarah had become a symbol of what was possible when communities and police worked together instead of against each other. But for them, it was simpler than that. It was the story of a family that found each other in the darkness and chose to build light together. Officer Bradley and Detective Reynolds had thought they could exploit a broken system. What they discovered instead was that the system wasn't broken. It just needed the right people to fix it. And sometimes those people find each other in the most unexpected ways. If this story of courage, family, and justice inspired you, remember that real change happens when we choose to trust each other across the lines that divide us. Sometimes the person who can help you the most is the one you least expect to understand your struggle.